Hi there. Now in the previous video we have learned how to create a two-dimensional array. Now in this video let's look at how can we insert a new value to the two-dimensional array. So let's say we have a two-dimensional array like this. So here we have 3 rows and 9 columns. Now in this case we know that when we are initializing a two-dimensional array, default values in case of integer are zeros, in case of strings are nulls. Now in this case if you want to insert any element over here, first we are going to put the array name, then the row index, and then the column index. So in this case in our array we have 3 rows and 9 columns. So for example, if I want to add an element to the 3rd row and 6th column over here, in which the row index is 2 and the column index 5, here I just need to put the array name, then the row index, then the column index. Now you see that the row index is 2 and the column index is 5. Then we are assigning a value to it. Then after assignment it's going to insert 30 over here. Now for example, if I want to insert an element at the first element of this array over here, which is located at the 0 row and 0 column, then in this case we just need to put array name, and in the row index we are putting 0 and in the column index we are putting again 0. So in this case 50 will be inserted over here. Now here the interesting moment is that if the cell is occupied, we cannot insert an element there. So in this case we are going to write our algorithm like this, that every time we are going to check that if the cell is already occupied or not. Now for example, in this case if I want to insert 60 to this first cell over here, so our algorithm should return something like this, saying that this cell is already occupied, because in this case this becomes update operation. But here we need to write an algorithm to insert elements to the two-dimensional array. So basically the logic is very simple. We are just putting the array name, then the location of the cell in which we want to insert an element. Then we are assigning a value to this location over here. Now hopefully everything is clear about the logic of the insertion of an element into two-dimensional array. Now based on this logic, let's create a method which will insert a new element to two-dimensional array. Now in this case, as I did in case of one-dimensional array, I've created two-dimensional array class over here. Now in this class, we are going to implement all our operations that are related to two-dimensional array. Because in this case, we are combining everything together to see the big picture of two-dimensional array. Now in this case, I have created a two-dimensional array class like this. Then in the first line of code, we have initialized the array, custom array over here. Then we have created constructed method over here. Now basically, as we said before, when we are creating a two-dimensional array with the type of integer, all cell elements are set to 0. But in this case, I don't want to be them 0, I want to set them to the minimum integer value. That's why I have created a constructor like this. So whenever we are initializing our array, this ARR array, everything are set to minimum integer value. So in this way, it makes our life easier when we are writing insert method, because we are going to check that if the value is equal to the minimum integer value, then in this case it means that our cell is empty, so we can insert a new element to this cell over here. So I'm going to create our method over here like this. So the method name will be insert value in the array. So it's going to be like this: public void insert value in the array. So this method will take 3 parameters. The first parameter will be the index of row, and the second parameter will be the index of column, and the third parameter will be the value that we want to insert. Now we know that row index and the column index is integer number, so I'm going to put it as integer. So int row, int column, second parameter, and the third parameter will be int value. Then one more time, to prevent index exception over here, I'm going to write our code inside try and catch block, because as an exception we are going to use array index out of bounds exception. Now we know that if the row and column index is maximum, for example 2, and if we put 3 over here, Java will give us error. To prevent this error and printing out the meaningful message to the console, we are going to use it in the try and catch block. So I'm going to put like this, try, so it's going to be like this. Then in the catch I'm going to put exception like this. So array index out of bounds exception, then inside catch. So we are going to print out invalid index to the array. Then inside try we are going to check that if the cell is empty or not. So I'm going to put it like this. If ARR with the index of row and index of column, these are the parameters that comes from here, is equal to integer dot minimum value, because we have set all elements to the minimum value. So if it is equal to minimum value, it means that this column is empty, so we can insert our element over here. So as we mentioned before, to assign an element to any given cell over here, we just need to put the array name, then row index and column index. Then with the equal sign, we are going to set it to value. So this value comes from this parameter over here. Now after putting so, we are going to print out saying that the value is successfully inserted. So I'm going to print out to the console saying that the value is successfully inserted. Now otherwise, in the else condition, if this cell is not empty, we are going to print out saying that this cell is already occupied. So with this, we have created our method. So basically what we are doing over here is, first we are checking that if this cell is empty or not. If it is empty, we are inserting a value to this cell over here. If it is not empty, we are printing out message saying that this cell is already occupied. Now let's see how this method is working in practice. So in the main class, I'm going to call this method to see that how it is working. Now here, the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to create instance of two-dimensional class over here. So two-dimensional array, I'll put it SDA equals to new two-dimensional array. For example, we are going to create an array with the 3 columns and 3 rows. So I'm going to put it like this. Then I'm going to call this insert method and insert an element to the first cell of this array. So it's going to be like this, SDA dot insert value in the array. So as a parameter, it's going to take 0 row, 0 column, and as a value, I'm going to put, for example, 10. Now let's run our code to see how this is working. Now after running our code, you see that the message is printed out here saying that the value is successfully inserted. Now if I one more time try to add another element to this cell over here, you see that the message will say that this cell is already occupied. So if I put like this and run our code, now here you see that first it's inserting the value, then it says that the cell is already occupied. Now after insertion, you might be interested that how our array looks like. So in this case, I'm going to use arrays library to print out two-dimensional array to the console. So it's going to be like this, system out.println. It's going to be like this, arrays.deep2string method. So as we said before, this method is useful for printing out multi-dimensional array to the console. So in this case, I'm going to put it like this. So if I run our code one more time, you see that after message, it's going to print out this two-dimensional array to the console. So now you see that first it says that the value is successfully inserted, then it's printing out two-dimensional array to the console in which we have 3 columns and 3 rows. Now as you see, the first cell of this two-dimensional array is 10 because we have inserted over here 10, but other cells are set to minimum integer value in Java. So this is because when we are creating two-dimensional class over here, we have created a constructed method over here which is setting all elements to this minimum integer value over here. Now with this, we have completed our method. So our method works the way that we want, and it inserts value to the two-dimensional array. Now you might be interested, what is the time complexity for this method over here? Now to get the time complexity for this method over here, one more time, we are going to start from the first line of code over here. Now in the first line, we are accessing the array element and checking that if this is equal to integer minimum value or not. Now in this case, this operation will take O1 time complexity because we know that to access an element of any array takes O1 time complexity, and checking it with a value also takes O1 time complexity. So this means that this line of code will take O1 time complexity. Now in the next line of code, we are just setting value to this array cell over here, and this one also takes O1 time complexity. Now in the next line of code, we are just printing out message to the console. So we know that printing out message to the console takes O1 time complexity. Now in the next line of code, in the else condition, one more time we are printing out message to the console. So this one also takes O1 time complexity. Now at the end, inside this exception, one more time we are printing out message to the console. And this one also over here takes O1 time complexity. Now if we combine these complexities over here, it takes O1 time complexity. So insertion in two-dimensional array in this case takes O1 time complexity. Now the space complexity also takes O1 time complexity, but because in this case we are just inserting one element to the given cell. So an additional memory is not required over here, so that's why it takes O1 space complexity. Now with this we have come to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture we have created a method which inserts a value to two-dimensional array. So hopefully everything is clear about this method. So see you in the next lecture.